the investor I was waiting for the last amount of money from for my. Oh, the investor I was waiting for the last amount of money from for my loot.
Oh. Yeah, it's fine. You ready?
Sure.
Hi everyone, how's everyone doing? Thank you for tuning in. It's Camille, Nerdabetic, and I'm here with Melissa. Hey Melissa.
Hey Camille, thanks for having me.
So good to have you. Thanks for joining me. This is my first Tech on Tap in person. How are you enjoying my flat? You first time seeing the... Actually, no, you've seen the Omnipod before.
In your old flat.
Yes.
The time that you had a great party.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So Melissa and I, we actually go way back. I was actually thinking about this earlier today. I think we've known each other, I think 2018, Rise of the Machines was the first time we met.
I think so, at least that long.
At least that long. And Melissa is on my invite list for my name day party, which is where I ask all of my friends to dress up as Camille to celebrate my name day. If you don't know what name day is, have a Google. It's a fascinating concept. Yeah, thanks for joining. We've got a few people. Hi Mark, thanks, so good to have you here. Sarah as well, thanks all for joining. I'm actually gonna zoom in slightly so you can see us slightly better. Cool, thanks all for being here. So, yeah, I just, let's maybe start with a cheers. For those of you who are drinking your afternoon tea, coffee or whatever, we have in a bit of a Prosecco, so cheers to that. We're gonna have a bit of a Prosecco. So yeah, so I thought, thank you for agreeing to do this. It's very good to be here with you. So I thought let's just start with a bit of your journey. Why did you get involved in diabetes? Like, how did diabetes enter into your life? I know you're someone living with diabetes. If you could kind of summarize your diabetes life journey, where would you start?
Oh, well, I'd start with being diagnosed with type 1 in 1994 in a relatively small part of Virginia called Fredericksburg. And I knew one person really close in my life. She was like a grandmother to me, not by blood, but very much by family relationship. And she was the only person I really knew who had type 1, and she was not doing very well. She eventually died of complications when she was 54. And the first thought I had when I learned that I had type 1 was, I don't want to end up like Barb.
Right.
And I thought the best thing I can do is know as much as I can. So when I was in the hospital for a week and my mom asked, is there anything I can bring you? Is there anything that you want from home, or can I go and buy something for you? I said, go to the bookshop and buy all the books they have about diabetes.
Right.
I'm going to be stuck in this hospital for a week. I might as well get reading. And that was kind of my nerdy start
Right.
to living with diabetes. Is I thought I better learn as
Were
much
there
as I
many
can.
books about diabetes back then?
There were several.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I guess probably most aimed at healthcare professionals at that stage.
Yeah. There
Yeah.
weren't that many books about diabetes for people with diabetes, and
Yeah.
it was definitely well before Gary Shiner had
Right.
written his first edition of Think
Sure.
Like a Pancreas.
Sure.
But it gave
And this
me
was in the States,
in
right?
the States, yeah. And that gave me a start though, in be thinking, well, I can learn stuff and I can understand stuff, and then I can use what I know in my conversations with my healthcare team.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how much I benefited from that until, flash forward, I moved to England in 2001
Yep.
to be a postgrad in history. I was studying the social and political positions of the families of married priests in
Wow.
England and Wales between 1560 and 1750. You have to get very specific for doctoral research in history.
Sure.
And I started hearing stories when I was at the pub or hanging out with people at events in Oxford. Oh, you have diabetes? Yeah, there's this girl on my staircase. Whenever we have a party, she goes to the hospital. Or there's this guy I know in my college. He went into a coma and his door had to be taken off the hinges.
Wow.
And I was like, what is going on? These are bright people. This is
Right.
an amazing university. What's happening? So I spoke with my friend who was at that point in 2002 the VP of welfare for the Oxford University Student Union.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to do something. What
Right.
can we do? And he said, come to my office, we'll design a poster and we'll send it out to all the colleges and
Right.
all the GPs that register students. And I said, okay, let's do it. So the AUSU Diabetes Network was born, and within 2 weeks I had 40 people on my email list.
Wow.
And university researchers were getting in touch saying we need to recruit for a study.
And this was clearly before the community, before social media was a thing. And now most clinics would have a patient support group or network. This was way before those days, right?
Yeah, way before those things. And as I heard about the College Diabetes Network, which became the Diabetes Link in the US, which is a fascinating and wonderful organization, I thought I kind of did that in my own small way,
Right.
in one place once.
Yeah.
And I knew what a difference it made for me and for the other people that I got to know. And so I have huge love for the work of the College
Right.
Diabetes Network, now the Diabetes Link, and how they help
Yeah.
young people who are getting independent in their diabetes management. So
Because that part of your life is very tricky. Like growing up and like it's difficult enough as it is, and even drawing on my experience, like it's tough as it is for most people. Adding diabetes to the mix just makes it a lot more difficult.
Absolutely, and to know that you have the numbers in your phone, that if you ran out of test strips at 10 o'clock on a Friday night, there was
Right.
somebody that you could message
Wow.
and say, hey, I am out of test strips, can you help?
Oh wow,
Rather
is that
than
what you guys did?
Yeah, there was even that degree of like,
Wow.
help, I need something, and avoiding having to go to the
Yeah.
hospital at night to get more test strips, or
Yeah.
or worse, having to wait until the pharmacy was open again and you had a repeat prescription to get more
Right.
test strips.
Yeah.
I mean, in those days, without CGM, and of course now people probably would be saying, hey, can I borrow a Libre until
Yeah.
I can get my next prescription? But
Yeah.
but we didn't just share supplies. That wasn't really the point. It was
Yeah.
the sitting down and the talking things through.
Yeah.
Education
Education.
and learning from each other. And I took it kind of seriously that I needed to be able to signpost people to good resources. So I started reading the Medscape website, which was
Okay.
only for healthcare professionals in those days. And I thought that one article had missed a couple points. So in summer of 2003, I sent a little email to the guy who'd written it, and he wrote me back and said, you made some great points. I'm going to ask the editor of the diabetes and endocrinology section of the website to give you a patient column,
Okay.
an expert patient
Oh,
column.
wow.
Oh, really? So in July 2003, my article called No, It's Not a Beeper, It's My Insulin Pump
Right.
went online, and I had 150 people email me.
Wow.
Yeah, including
Wow.
people saying, would you like to get involved in this project? Would you like to maybe do some work for us? And more heartwarming than that were the people who said, I'm going to share this article with,
Yeah.
who I'm going to use it with. There was
Right.
a teacher who said, I'm going to use this with my high school students to talk about the concepts of identity, disability, and empowerment.
Right.
And there was a doctor who said, I'm going to show this to my patients and help them understand why I think insulin pumps might be of benefit to them. And one person, I'm going to show this to my mom because she lives with type 1 diabetes, and she said she would never want to get more technology.
Yeah.
And I think that your story might help her.
Yeah.
And so knowing that those were like more people than would ever read anything I wrote in history.
Right.
Right. It kind of helped me make my decision that I really wanted to do more in diabetes.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to become a rep for a pump company.
Okay.
In the UK.
Right.
In 2004. And the job offer got pulled 3 weeks before my start date because of things that had happened above everyone's heads in terms of a lawsuit. So I had to jump back to the US, and I really didn't want to, but that was that. But that did give me the opportunity to work for Abbott Diabetes Care for a couple of years.
Yep.
And living in Alameda, working with some of the people I got to know at Abbott, we still keep in touch a lot. So whenever I go to diabetes conferences, it's like a combination of a workplace reunion, 2005 to 2007, and seeing some of my best friends that I still keep in contact with almost weekly. So that's cool.
No, it's an amazing journey. Like one of the I think I still like to think that I got involved in the community reasonably early, like 2017. But actually, that was like beginning of the online community. But the offline community, the example you just talked about, actually has been in existence. Like people have been craving education. People have been craving peer support since the foundation, since the very beginning of diabetes, right?
Oh, since the beginning of the internet, really.
Yeah.
I mean, after I wrote that article, I got invited to join a little email group that included several people in it who I've gotten to meet in real life over the years, who were really intensively self-managing their type 1, including Scott Hanselman. So, you know, he's known for a lot of the work he's done with Microsoft, but he's also been quite a good advocate about diabetes technology management. So, you know, Scott and I have been in touch since 2003.
Yeah.
And I knew before I came to the UK for that post-grad experience, I needed to learn how the NHS worked. And I found that insulinpumpers.org had a UK email group, and I joined that. So one of the first people I got to meet in person from that group, who spotted me some infusion sets when I was running out in 2002, eventually became one of my bridesmaids when I got married in 2010. So these relationships, they run deep. I haven't told you yet how I came back to the UK. In 2007, I thought, actually, I don't want to stay in America. And there was an opportunity, there was a visa, it was a window of opportunity. I went through it. And I became a consultant in a healthcare business consulting company. And that started out really well, but then they started giving me more Excel to do, and Excel is not my thing the way Excel is your thing.
Really isn't.
Camille knows, because I had to ask him to look at some of my spreadsheets before, and he's just like, oh dear. Listen, no. But this is why we work all together.
Very well together.
And not my love language. But
and
then I worked in healthcare advertising.
That's right.
And alongside the work I did in healthcare advertising as a medical copywriter, for 5 years I helped run a small charity helping people in the UK access diabetes technology and education on the NHS, alongside Leslie Jordan, who is still with Breakthrough T1D UK. And we had about 300 people a year make contact with us. So I was the first point of contact there.
The charity that Melissa is referring to was Input, which I think many of people who tune in who live in the UK will probably recognise or probably make contact. It was it is to your point, it's still valid, so it was merged with JDRF and now Breakthrough T1D. Just incredible resource. If you have any questions on access or tech in the UK, it would be you answering those questions. On the other side, I say you and Leslie and the amazing team of volunteers there, right?
Well, and really mostly Leslie and me, to be fair, in those days. But now with Breakthrough T1D, you get the resource of the community engagement team. And I feel like it's wonderful when I meet people who are struggling to access what they need, and I can tell them, get in touch with Breakthrough T1D, because they're going to be able to help. And then there are times when I'll hear from Leslie about a specific situation where, in the abstract, if this were the situation, what might be a way forward? And so I like that I can still remain in contact.
Yeah.
I feel like I had to make a map of how the NHS works in my head
Yes.
because I came from outside the UK and I had to learn how it functions. Sometimes how it doesn't function. And single payer healthcare doesn't mean that everybody always gets what they need eventually. Sometimes people do end up stuck.
No, I remember using inputs like insulin pump funding guides when I was trying to get my insulin pump funding. So very, very relatable. And shout out to Leslie who works for Breakthrough 2D. I had dinner with her just a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and she's doing fantastic work there, continuing the legacy.
And really, it was part of my story is that when I came to the UK and I needed to get my insulin pump supplies funded, the man who founded Input, John Davis, was a huge advocate and help, and he got me on TV, he got me in the local newspaper, he got the local MP interested in why the, at that point, Primary Care Trust wasn't implementing the brand new nice TA one, actually it was TA 60, this is testing me. It was a very early TA in terms of technology. People will refer to TA 151, but there was one before that was the first one on insulin pumps in 2003. And so I feel like I've kind of
been through the journey.
Through the whole arc. And really, in the time that I was working on queries that came through to Input, we saw the balance of inquiries shift from almost all people wanting to get an insulin pump to a majority of people talking about CGM, and I thought that was a really interesting time frame to be working on access to diabetes technology, to see the shift. And we haven't totally solved access in the UK. We still have a lot of work to do, and of course we're barely started when it comes to people with type 2 diabetes getting advanced tools. But I can see the progress.
The progress has been huge, undoubtedly.
And in the rear view mirror, I can see that there's been some really significant community effort. There have been some healthcare professionals who have really worked hard, and there are organizations that have really kept coordinating to keep the pressure on, and I'm happy about that.
Which actually, it's and I think those like the education piece around CGM is something, to your point, that we haven't solved. Which actually probably brings us very closely to Smart Start, your new project. If someone is watching, never heard of Smart Start, what is it? What are you trying to solve?
Excellent way to get this part off. So on my business card and on the website, there's this phrase, making it easier to use CGM. And you could ask, well, why do we need to make it easier to use CGM? Well, from my perspective, I still see the same questions posted in Facebook groups today in 2025 that I had when I started using my first CGM in the US in 2006. And the technology has moved on incredibly in terms of wearability, usability, the length you can have a sensor on.
Were you on the Dexcom 7?
Oh, before that, baby. I was on the STS. I had the OG
so from Dexcom STS to G7.
Sensor.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So I've never even seen that one. That CGM is so old.
Oh, yeah.
I've got in my bedroom I've got the 7. Is it the 7 Plus?
7 Plus would have been another vintage one.
7 Plus. Yeah. Someone shipped me a box full of supplies. But and that, it's ancient technology.
Oh yeah.
So if the one before that.
And I'd been in internal trials at Abbott for the Navigator.
Right. Yeah.
So
You've been around CGM for a while.
Been around CGM for a while, exactly. So to see that we've gone, such a distance with making the technology itself more powerful. When we started talking about MARD in single digits, I was there from when we were talking about MARD of 13 to 15% being an advance, and now we're talking about below 10% is a threshold for entry into the market.
MARD is an accuracy of CGM, and we now, I think you probably agree with me saying this, we now at the stage where most of the big players in the CGM space are more accurate than a lot of the finger-stick glucose monitors that we have.
We could talk about accuracy until the cows come home, but
we could.
I am pleased that we're seeing progress with the international standards too. Well, with this, With the numbers that we see in terms of, you know, the manufacturers saying that they're getting down to a small amount of difference from what would be a sophisticated lab test of blood. But also we're getting to where we're going to be able to compare the systems more objectively. And I think that's going to be good. Anyway, so back to Smart Start. What does it do?
What does it do?
What does it do? So I like to say in one line, in a nutshell, we're putting diabetes education with adaptive learning paths on people's phones. And you might ask, what's an adaptive learning path? Well, that's when, depending upon how you interact with the information and the resources that you see on the screen, what you get next shifts dynamically.
Right.
So the learning journey can be personalized for everybody based on what they come in already being aware of and understanding. And then as they're learning, they get resources that are tailored to what's working well, what they're understanding already, and where they might need a bit more support to get the point.
So the idea is you use a CGM, or you start in a CGM, and you're trying to learn more about how to best get the information out of it, basically educate yourself on how to use CGM, and Smart Start will see where in the CGM journey you are and help you regardless of whatever you just started or you've been using it for a number of years, and there are actually gaps in your knowledge that you probably were not even aware of that you should try to fill. So it will not tell you this is what CGM is because you obviously already know that. It will start you much further along that journey.
Right, depending upon what you come in already knowing. But I do feel too like there's always some value in having a refresher. So like it's not that you would completely skip, here are the parts of a CGM, you know, standard CGM. Because I see it in the Facebook groups. Sometimes someone will say, oh, I'm having a problem with my CGM sensor.
Right.
But what they really mean is it's the transmitter that's not working.
Right.
But if they phoned up and spoke with the company and they used the word transmitter or sensor interchangeably, they might not get the help they need.
Right.
And if you're on the phone with somebody, they can't see that you're talking about the gray part.
Right.
If you see what I mean.
Right.
So making sure that we get the vocabulary down is also useful for, you know, getting what we want at the right time.
Because it could be a completely different team, or they could be like, oh, they're talking about sensor, so this is the, you know, these are the steps I'm going to suggest, etc., etc.
Exactly, and just to make sure that we're all aware that, you know, when we see a device that has a one and done insertion, that it still has components.
Right.
And how do you even look at the app for your CGM or the receiver? If you actually looked at it as someone who is brand new to diabetes, you'd say, gosh, there's a lot of numbers on here.
Right.
And why would I need to look at the trend graph that goes back 12 hours versus 6 versus 3
Especially
versus
if you're
1?
not good with spreadsheets.
Yeah, first person perspective.
Particularly, yes.
Yeah. I'll take that joke from you. But I have met people who are really doing the best they can with the tools that they have in terms of using the diabetes technology. And the way they're understanding how to use their CGM is they just look at the big number the same way that 15 years ago we would look at the big number on a BG meter.
Right.
But now we have so much more power to go, ooh, is that a 7.5, but I'm on the way down, and maybe I should consider how fast my glucose level is going down, and do I have insulin on board that might mean that maybe I really should have some jelly babies before I take that 15-minute walk to the rail station to avoid having hypo. Whereas, 15 years ago, it would be easy to go, 7.5, I think I'm fine. And then, ooh, I feel a bit funny by the time I've got to the train station. I guess I'll have to have the jelly babies now. Why do we have to go through feeling funny when we could actually take a proactive step? And I feel like that's something that some folks I meet are missing out on from how they're using their CGM at the moment. And so what I should also say is that in terms of, well, why do I think this is going to work? I did a proof of concept study in the US with a doctor who's a really lovely guy called Tom Grace. Who is
had a pleasure of meeting him.
Yes, you have. And he had the pleasure of meeting you because he was really pleased to meet you when I introduced you the other year. So Tom lives with type 1,
Yeah.
and he's really into tech, and he's now the head of clinical advocacy and outcomes for Dexcom.
Yeah.
I'm glad I got to work with him before he got that job.
Yeah, it's a good timing, yeah. Yeah.
But we had the chance to work together to design some of the things in the proof of concept version of Start CGM, thanks to Diabetes Center Bern.
Yep.
Shout out to DCB.
Shout out to DCB.
Yes, who funded the development of the proof of concept.
Yep.
And thanks also to Dexcom for a grant that went into the working as well.
Yep.
It really was fun to be able to work with somebody who had such similar goals and objectives.
Right.
And anyway.
And sees the challenges that you've talked about through Facebook groups and what happened in 2006, day-to-day in clinic, right?
Right.
That education piece.
Exactly. And to have the perspective of someone who not only lives with type 1, but is treating dozens of patients
Right.
every week.
Right.
And a lot of his patients are already on AIDs, automated insulin delivery systems,
Yep.
or hyperclosed loop. And to hear, yeah, these are the things that come up again and again, and I need a resource that can help me
Yep.
discuss this better with my patients I see. I thought, yes, we're really working well together. So, what did we find out in the proof of concept study?
Yep.
Well, I had the privilege of presenting the data at the American Diabetes Association meeting last year in
Yep.
Orlando. First, on the what we call welcome check, the 20-question baseline assessment, I saw the scores coming in as we were enrolling folks, and I saw that they were pretty low, which meant people were answering either not sure or
Right.
getting not quite the right answer on this multiple choice quiz. I thought these must be folks who are pretty new to CGM.
Right. And what were the kind of questions you were asking in that?
Imagine that Jordan has a low alert on his CGM at 2 in the morning, and he wakes up and does a finger stick, and it's in GDL 143.
Yeah.
What could be the cause of this?
Right.
You know, and the answer is that it was a compression low, sleeping on
Right.
sensor. But
See, I think I think your study proved that many compression low, even though it's something we are fully aware of, and I've experienced many times, many people probably experience as well. I think outside of the little bubble that we surround ourselves in, sometimes many people don't know that compression low is something that CGMs are susceptible to.
right, and because we get the advice to try to wear it on the arm, and
Right.
your arm is it's something that has all the way around.
Sure.
It's really easy to put it on a place where
Yeah.
you're going to end up putting pressure on that
Yeah.
CGM, and even if you don't usually sleep on your arm, you might at some point roll over in your sleep, and
Yeah.
that could be the issue. But if you respond to the urgent low of the CGM with this precipitous drop by going and inhaling some jelly babies,
Yeah.
and then you wonder in the morning, why is my blood sugar so high? That's just frustrating.
Yeah.
And so wanting to make sure that compression low is on the agenda. Another question in there is looking at a time and range graph. Here's Jane, here's what her time and range is looking like. What would her diabetes healthcare professional probably say about this?
Right.
And in Jane's graph, she's got high time in range between 70 and 140 mgdl, or between, say, 4 and 10
Right.
millimole. But she's also got high time below range.
Right.
So
These are not what is a CGM? These are questions that actually
conceptual.
Yeah.
And the answer to that one, spoiler alert, if you decide you're going to try Start CGM, you'll know the answer to this one already.
Yeah.
But the answer is, let's have a look at those lows.
Right.
Because really, if someone's having quite significant time below range, more than 4%, that's going to impact on their quality of life, their safety, and it's not great. So we should be able to enjoy living with diabetes as much as we possibly can.
Of course, yeah.
By not thinking, oh gosh, I feel like I just keep having these lows, and I don't know why. So that's one of the points. So anyway, having seen the low scores coming in, I thought, these must be folks who are pretty new to CGM.
Right.
But that wasn't true. When I got the data on who was included in this group of folks that Tom shared the program with, actually over 2 years average use of CGM. There was only one person who had been diagnosed less than 1 year. average of 20 years of living with diabetes.
Which validates the point you just made. Something like compression lows, it's something that actually, it's not something that is routinely, most healthcare professionals probably would not talk about that as part of your onboarding when you get on CGM. It's not something that is in the user manual. It's not something that is routinely kind of talked about. And when you use CGM 24/7, it does happen, right?
Well, yeah, and even if it is in the user manual, I mean, let's be honest, how many of us have got the user manual under the bed?
Right, yeah.
I mean, I worked in packaging and labeling when I was at it, and there were things that went into the user manual, when you have to proofread it.
I've used every single mainstream CGM on the market. I've read one section of one user manual ever, just to see what the formal sensor location was. Like, if it was actually approved for abdomen, because there's all this stuff that, like, for people younger than 18 could be approved in different places to people over 18. That was the only thing that I wanted to check.
Right.
But apart from that, who reads user manuals?
Right.
I mean,
they're required for regulatory.
Yes,
and
right.
The companies do want to make them accessible.
Right.
But at the same time,
no.
You don't wanna. And
let's be realistic about it.
Let's be realistic. Yeah. And also, I learned recently, you're mentioning about, does a healthcare professional share something with somebody in terms of their onboarding?
Yeah.
Well, between 40 and 80% of health information communicated verbally gets lost within 1 week.
Wow.
We just can't absorb and retain. The human brain isn't wired for taking this information that might be really important and quite useful to us and hang on to all of it.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, actually, whether it's covered in person or on a Zoom training or in a video or what have you, giving folks the opportunity to have a little read of something, maybe a little watch of a video, and then answer a little knowledge comprehension question about it, helps us learn.
I mean, you're saying, why I started Nerdbetic, really. Like, I think information translated in a video or an animation like that speaks 1,000 words.
Yeah.
We've already got a few questions coming in. I've put in the chat. Any questions, let us know in the chat and we'll answer them at the end. But I agree. Videos and those tutorials are much better than user manuals.
Well, and the key things that people will benefit from knowing, as opposed to everything that has to be mentioned.
Right.
And we want to know stuff that is going to be immediately useful and relevant. More than we need to know something that might happen, 6 or 8 weeks or months out from today. So I wanted to make sure that things are relatable. And also, another thing I think is that there's a lot of nodding and smiling in healthcare. And I'm prone to it too. I like to do active listening, and if somebody's telling me something, I might be hearing it for the first time, and I might be going like, yeah. And if that person interprets what I'm doing as, oh, she's miles ahead of me, she already gets this, I'm going to move on, I'm going to skip this next bit.
I'm not going to mention compression lows because surely she knows about that one.
Or even the nodding and smiling gives off the vibe that we are all on the same page. But if I got asked to explain back what I just heard for the first time, would it sound a bit like something about would I be a bit reticent in how I could explain it, or would I feel confident and like I totally had it? I'd probably be stammering a little on it, but we don't have that time in healthcare for people to get that much back and forth with their team.
We don't.
And healthcare professionals have a lot of work to do. Like, they have to see a lot of patients in a day. And there just isn't the opportunity. So I'm like, actually having the chance to check on, like, did we get that bit? Did we get that most important bit? And if we didn't, can we present the information again a little later in a slightly different way? And does it make sense on the second pass? Is something that matters a lot to me in how Start CGM will be working. Now, I have to say too that the proof of concept version was on a non-adaptive platform because I wanted to see if just exposing people to the content would make a difference. Because if it didn't make a difference to share the information with people, why go and take a lot of time and effort
Sure.
to build a platform to do it with adaptive paths.
Yeah.
And I told you that there was this low baseline knowledge score on
Yes.
the proof of concept version. Well, it more than doubled by the time folks got to what we call the final check.
Right.
And I thought, okay, great. We went from 38% on average to 88% on
Wow.
average. Folks learned something.
Yeah.
Great. But did that translate into any difference in their diabetes management?
Right.
That's the next big question.
Yeah.
And yeah, it did too, which
nice.
was really wonderful to see. And in this group of 20 people, 15 of them were on either a tandem t:slim with control IQ
Yeah.
or they were on Omnipod 5. It was
Right.
a mix of systems in use. And there were 5 who were on MDI. So we didn't have like the largest, most diverse sample of people using different tools, but
Yeah.
we had, these folks mostly had a great shot at being able to get to 70% time in range.
Yeah.
And what I saw was that if you look at and this is my proud brag moment about the stats,
Yeah.
if you think, okay, who in this cohort of 20 had no more than 4% time below range and 70% time in range
Right.
at the beginning,
Right.
25% at baseline.
Wow.
Yeah, so actually some of the folks who were reaching the 70% milestone were actually having quite a bit of time below range in order to get there, which is no fun. Well, if you look again, 6 weeks after each person completed Start CGM, what was their time in range looking like for the previous couple weeks?
Right.
Well, 65% were meeting both goals.
Wow.
And that's when I
big
thought,
input.
yeah, I need to take this out. I need to make
Right.
this available to people. This
Right.
needs to happen. And also, another kind of a footnote stat, of the folks who were not yet getting the 70% time in range at the beginning, which was 9 people, 6 of them got at least a 5% increase in their time in range within that 6 weeks of finishing Start CGM.
Right.
And that 5% increment is really meaningful because it means you're actually spending more time in range in a real way and
increasing time and happiness.
And you're seeing some success
Right.
with some changes that you might have made.
Right.
And once you have some momentum,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to keep that stuff up.
Right.
So we've taken a little look at the follow-up data at the 6-month point, and we're going to look at the 1-year point.
Yep.
And I'll see if I can get a publication out about that in 2025. Because also, it's one thing if you learn something new and you can keep it up for, say, several weeks. It's another thing if doing something on your phone that takes less than 2 hours, that's the other thing. Start, it's not a quick thing to do, but most people in the proof of concept group got it all in between 90 and 120 minutes. And with the adaptive learning paths, I'm hopeful that we might be able to shrink the learning journey for the folks who are flying through and maybe even expand the time for the folks who need a bit more to get to the end. But, that's what I'm building at the moment. I'm excited to see where we can go.
Yeah.
And also what we can do outside of just understanding the CGM data when we get into specifics to support people who might be using a smart MDI system or who might be given other tools in managing their diabetes.
Amazing. Great. We've got a few questions. First of all, just Zara saying it's so amazing to hear Melissa's story and be able to appreciate what journey she's had. Big fan there. And there was a question as we were talking about some of the practical things, I think, when you were describing kind of the impact it had on someone's management. If you could give us like 1 or 2 like things that people have learned from using Smart Start that maybe you can share with us.
Certainly. There were a few folks who felt moved to write an email to Tom. I got the anonymized emails as feedback. We didn't require that folks give me something in writing about how they enjoyed it or didn't, but it was nice that some felt like they should. One person said, I never got much formal training on how to use my CGM. Now I feel like I will be making more of an effort to pre-bolus because I can see what a difference that might make, and I've had a chance to try it out, and it really does make a difference in my glucose after meals. And I thought that was cool because really when you have a habit of how you manage your diabetes, you might get used to seeing something, but you might not be inspired to change that and then see what happens. So that was a big plus. And then another person commented that they had never known there was such a thing as too much time below range.
Right.
Because
Wow.
the time in range
Wow.
had been so emphasized.
Right.
And you think, well, gosh,
Yeah.
I'm glad that folks are getting the appreciation.
Yeah.
And before we move on to talking about time in normoglycemia or TIN, the tighter range argument, we have to help folks understand that your quality of life matters, your time and happiness matters, and your safety matters.
Yeah. And actually, Zara just made a point about that, saying there's really not enough training on that, and that reviewing data is not currently part of the Daphne course, which I guess is something that probably many people watching, that's the traditional way of providing education. More really focused on overall diabetes education as opposed to CGM, but it has not been updated really to really reflect the latest standards of care in diabetes, which to your point, for type 1s that is CGM, for type 2s it's going to be CGM in not too distant future.
Absolutely.
But it just hasn't been updated.
Well, and to your point there,
and who can also, I remember I did it when I was younger. It required me having to go to a clinic in person for 5 days. Many people who might be working, doing shift work or having very busy lives, that's a significant commitment. And I think in today's society it's actually very, it increases the barrier to entry for people to educate them about diabetes, right?
It's a perfect opportunity for me to give you another kind of slice of the background story here. Why did I decide I needed to do this thing anyway? Not just because I could see there was a need, but because I was inspired by learning about a face-to-face program that became available in Germany several years ago called Spectrum. And Spectrum was about getting 8 people with type 1 together in a conference room with a healthcare professional. Similar setup to Daphne. And there were up to 8 sessions of 1.5 hours each for people to learn about how to use their CGM. And these were supposed to be spread out over a period of several weeks. And I thought, what a great initiative, but also this would never happen in the NHS. Like, who has that time and the resource to make that work? And I spoke to the guys who innovated with creating the materials for Spectrum and said, I love the idea of what you're doing, but I just wonder if there's a chance to deliver digitally. Exactly. And they said, that sounds great. Do you want all 300 PowerPoint slides? And there's a slightly rough but usable English translation. Have fun. So that became the basis of what I wanted to do with Start CGM. I waited until they published their validation study in September 2020 to get really started on it, because I thought, I need to see that this thing achieved something in the real world. And in a study of 100 people in Germany, it did, so that was good. But flash forward to 2022, when I was really underway with making the proof of concept version, there was no content available in the original Spectrum slides on how to look at time and range and how to do AGP, because the slides had dated from 2015. And I spoke to the guys in Germany and said, do you have an update on the slides that will include these concepts? And they said no, because in Germany they would have to rerun the entire validation study if they changed the content that much. And I thought, oh goodness, this is really up to Tom and me to figure out how we're going to talk about time and range and AGP, ambulatory glucose profile, when it looks like it's a kind of an ocean wave of your glucose levels over the last few weeks or so. And I thought, what an opportunity for us to try to shape how conversations might play out between somebody with diabetes and their healthcare professional, and to frame that someone might look at their own time and range data before they go to the clinic and have an opinion and a perspective on what they think's going on. Because that's something that in my time with input, I often would communicate with folks who were afraid of going to their next clinic appointment. And I'd be like, right, there should be no surprises. This is something where, like, we can talk through your data before you go to the clinic so that you know what you think you need help with. You know what you think's going well, and you know what your story is. And you don't have to feel caught out. You're not being sent to the head teacher's office with just the vague idea that somebody's in trouble for something. Like, and neither would you go to a travel agent and just drop an atlas on their desk and say, tell me where to go on holiday. But when we go to the diabetes clinic with the idea that we just drop data on their computer screen and they're supposed to tell us how it's going, I feel like we're underusing their professional insight. When, if I need to talk to a professional about something, even a plumber, like I wouldn't call a plumber into my flat and say, I don't know what's going wrong. I would at least know, well, the toilet is blocked.
Yes.
Well, my husband would probably be able to
Yeah,
fix
Richard
the
would
toilet.
do that, yeah.
Richard could fix it. Yeah. Credit to Richard. But
Shout out to Richard.
Shout out to Richard. He's always good at clearing toilet
He's
blockages.
watching.
Yeah, he's not watching, I guarantee. But it's fine. But when we have had issues, I've been able to say to the plumber, here's what's going wrong, here's what we've tried already, and I'm ready for your expertise.
In the same way to our previous conversation, you something like compression lows. It's just the reality of spending 30 minutes every 6 or 12 months in your clinic is that's a piece of knowledge that they just will not be able to deliver in a clinical environment, or how to review your data properly, right? It's just not feasible.
No, it's not. And I feel like for us living with diabetes, we owe it to ourselves to be able to own that data and to be able to go, actually, in that time between, if I notice there's a change in a trend in my data, maybe it's because something's not working the way it used to, or maybe my hormones are shifting, or maybe my insulin doses are working differently now that I've got a new exercise habit.
I'll start using GLP-1.
Yeah. More to the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Any final last minute questions, please let us know. There was a question earlier on as well about Medtronic sensors. Normally I would be answering these questions, but you're just as well informed in all this as I am. A simpler rollout, do we have any timelines on when that's coming out to existing customers? I think the latest I've heard is that the software update is slowly rolling out, but they're ramping up manufacturing. So when they have the capability to roll it out, they will.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything latest on that at ATTD.
No. They were giving out the little demo sticker on the booth.
Yeah, it's actually in that box over there.
Yep. In your souvenirs from Amsterdam box.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Next to a giant storage of Coke Zero next to it. Cool. Great. No, this has been very, very fun. Thank you for all of the questions, and if anyone has any other questions, let us know and we will answer them offline. This was very, very fun. Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah,
if someone wants to learn about Smart Start, where can they go? Like, where people can find you and Smart Start, and if someone wants to get educated, how do they get started?
Perfect to end on this point. So the website is smartstart.health, and if you can think in MGDL, you can get Smart Start CGM on the non-adaptive platform. Right now, I can take your credit card. There's a code for getting it at a great discount, because I'm like, it shouldn't cost more than buying a book about diabetes should cost. And given, especially for a lot of folks who use MGDL in the US, there might be co-pays in order to see a healthcare professional and learn more about their diabetes. I'm like, actually, this needs to be available, but knowing that in a couple hours or less, you could get further than you might in up to 2 years of regular appointments. I'm like, I wanted to put the proof of concept version of Smart Start CGM on the website now. If folks are in Millimal world and they really super want to be able to use Smart Start CGM, I'm working on it, guys. I'm working on it, and the adaptive platform will have Millimal first. In the short term, if you really super want to use the MGDL version, the conversion factor is to divide by 18.1.
Yes.
And if you just want to hang with me, or you know anybody who might like to make an investment in a startup that wants to make big waves in diabetes education, I'm on LinkedIn as Melissa Holloway, and on the website you can also find my LinkedIn on the bio. And tell a friend.
Tell a friend. Cool. Thank you, Melissa. Cheers. And thanks all for tuning in to episode 2 of Tech on Tap. It's really Prosecco on tap today. Thanks all. Bye-bye.